Acute wounds bites. Most bites involve either puncture wounds or avulsions. Wounds over the metacarpophalangeal joint should be treated as a human bite following a punch to the mouth until proven. Otherwise, joint infections are a surgical emergency as they can result in articular cartilage destruction. They present as hot, swollen and tender joints with a limited range of motion. Degloving. Degloving is the avulsion of skin and subcutaneous fat from the underlying fascia, muscle or bone. A degloving injury may be open or closed. An example of an open degloving is a Effenger avulsion injury with loss of skin, figure 3.10. Closed degloving injuries result from shearing forces. Figure 3.10 degloving injury of the right little Closed degloving injuries result from shearing forces. Figure 3.10 degloving injury of the right little and ring Effengers. Which may occur with motor vehicle collisions. The extent of these injuries is often underappreciated and much of the skin may be non-viable. Figure 3.11. Disruption of perforating vascular and lymphatic vessels may result in a characteristic hemolymphatic collection between the fascial planes called a Morel-Lavalley lesion, figure 3.12. Although these lesions were originally described as occurring over the greater trochanter, the term is also used now for similar lesions in other anatomical locations. Assessing the viability of degloved tissue can be difficult, and may therefore require more than one surgical exploration and debridement before definitive reconstruction. Non-viable skin may show FXED staining and thrombosis of subcutaneous veins. Most surgeons serially excise the degloved skin until punctate dermal bleeding is seen from viable tissue. Intravenous fluorescein may also help delineate non-viable tissue, but it requires specialist equipment and there is a small risk of anaphylaxis. More recently, the use of indocyanine green fluorescence has been reported. A useful class of cation system to help guide management describes 4 patterns of degloving, summary box 3.5. It may be appropriate to offer primary amputation in cases of severe multiplanar degloving. Class of cation of degloving injuries in limb trauma 9-1 limited degloving with abrasion or avulsion 2 non-circumferential degloving 3 circumferential single plane degloving 4 circumferential multiplanar degloving. Acute compartment syndrome. Acute compartment syndrome occurs when there is increased interstitial pressure within a closed osteofascial compartment, which results in microvascular compromise. It is a surgical emergency as delayed treatment may lead to irreversible muscle ischemia and significant long-term morbidity. Compartment syndrome most commonly occurs after Figure 3.12 mechanism of injury for Morel. Lower limb fractures, both open and closed, see Chapter 32. It also occurs in the upper limb, buttock and abdomen. Other causes include soft tissue trauma, arterial injuries, burns and prolonged compression. It is characterized by pain out of proportion to the injury, particularly with passive movement of the eighth compartment muscles. Paresthesia is another early sign. Absent pulses are uncommon and suggest the possibility of vascular injury. Compartment syndrome is generally a clinical diagnosis. It can be difficult to diagnose in the presence of impaired consciousness, in children and in patients with regional nerve blocks. Monitoring intracompartment pressures, ICPs, can sometimes help to guide management. A pressure of is less than or equal to 30 mm of mercury between the diastolic pressure and ICP has been recommended as the threshold for fasciotomy. Fasciotomy involves incising the skin and deep fascia with long axial incisions, figure 3.13. If the compartment pressure was high, the muscle will then be seen bulging out through the fasciotomy opening. The lower limb is reliably decompressed via 2 incisions. A medial longitudinal incision 1 to 2 cm posterior to the medial border of the tibia decompresses the superficial and deep posterior compartments. A lateral longitudinal incision 2 cm lateral to the anterior tibial border decompresses the perineal and anterior compartments. Late diagnosis of compartment syndrome is a management dilemma as a late fasciotomy may result in rhabdomyolysis, infection, need for amputation and even death. Necrotizing fasciitis. This is a severe, rapidly progressing infection of the soft tissue and fascia associated with significant morbidity and mortality, figure 3.14. Reported mortality rates vary widely, but a Danish nationwide cohort study including over 1,500 patients found 30-day and 1-year mortality rates of up to 26% and 40%, respectively. 0.10. The infection is commonly polymicrobial, figure 3.13. Fasciotomy of the leg. But monomicrobial presentation with Streptococcus pyogenes, group Streptococcus, is also frequent. Examples of other organisms include Staphylococcus aureus, Escherichia coli, Pseudomonas, Clostridium and bacteroids. There is usually a history of trauma or surgery with wound contamination. Diabetes mellitus is the most common comorbidity, although up to 30% of patients may not have any comorbidities. 11. Clinical features are shown in summary. Box 3.6. A scoring system to aid clinical decision-making has been developed, but its performance remains questionable. 12. It remains primarily a clinical diagnosis and surgical treatment should not be delayed if suspicion is high. Treatment consists of appropriate intravenous antibiotics, with urgent radical surgical debridement. A second look operation is usually planned in 24 to 48 hours depending on clinical response. Multiple debridements may be required. Chronic wounds. These wounds fail to progress through the normal stages of wound healing in a timely manner. They are often characterized by a prolonged inflammatory phase and persistent infections. The management of chronic wounds therefore often involves debridement, table 3.4, control of infection and inflammation and appropriately selected dressings to correct moisture imbalances. Chronic wounds can be categorized into vascular ulcers, venous or arterial, diabetic ulcers and pressure ulcers. Leg ulcers. In developed countries, the most common chronic wounds are leg ulcers. An ulcer can be defined as a break in the epithelial continuity. A prolonged inflammatory phase leads to overgrowth of granulation tissue and attempts to heal by scarring leave a fibrotic margin. Necrotic tissue, often at the ulcer center, is called slough. The more common etiologies are listed in summary box 3.7. A chronic ulcer that is unresponsive to dressings and simple treatments should be biopsied to rule out neoplastic change, a squamous cell carcinoma known as a Marjolins ulcer being the most common. Effective treatment of any leg ulcer depends on treating the underlying cause, and diagnosis is therefore vital. Arterial and venous circulation should be assessed, as should sensation throughout the lower limb. Surgical treatment is only indicated if non-operative treatment has failed. Etiology of leg ulcers. Filled circle. Vascular, venous, arterial, mixed. trauma, bites, self-inflicted, burns, infection, bacterial, fungal, mycobacterial, syphilis, metabolic disorders, diabetes mellitus, gout, calciphylaxis, autoimmune disorders, vasculitis, systemic sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, neoplastic, squamous cell carcinoma, basal cell carcinoma. Pressure ulcers. Pressure ulcers occur over a bony prominence or under a medical or other device, figure 3.15. A number of similar classifications exist. The U.S. National Pressure Injury Advisory panel has replaced the term pressure ulcer with pressure injury in its staging system, Table 3.5, to provide a more accurate description of injuries to both intact and ulcerated skin. 13 Pressure injuries should be regarded as preventable. There is a higher incidence in those who are severely ill, those who have impaired mobility, or those with a significant loss of sensation. The most common sites are listed in Summary Box 3.8. Common sites for pressure injuries in ulcers: filled circle ischium, filled circle greater trochanter, filled circle sacrum, filled circle heel, filled circle malleolus, filled circle occiput. Prevention starts with assessing risk using a validated score to support clinical judgment such as the Braden Scale, Waterloo Score, or Norton Risk Assessment Scale. Patients at risk of developing pressure injuries should have a skin assessment, regular repositioning every 2 to 4 hours, and the use of pressure distributing devices is appropriate. Patients should receive education on self-care, and risk factors need to be addressed, such as providing nutritional support for any deficiencies. The treatment of pressure ulcers should focus on patient optimization, especially any aspects of poor nutrition and ongoing poorly managed medical problems, to address any risk factors. Preventative measures are used and debridement may be appropriate. Table 3.4. Dressings should be chosen to create an optimum wound healing environment, and appropriate antibiotics given if there are signs of infection. Surgery is not FRST line treatment and is only considered when the above measures have been fully implemented. Patients must also be well motivated and able to fully comply with postoperative preventative measures. Surgical management of pressure sores follows some of the same principles described for wound management in Table 3.2. Primary closure and skin grafting should be avoided as they are likely to fail. In suitable patients, successful reconstruction options include the use of large fasciocutaneous or musculocutaneous flaps. If possible, use a flap that can be advanced further if there is recurrence and that does not interfere with the planning of neighboring flaps that may be used in the future. Scar management principles: the remodeling and maturation phase of wound healing results in scar formation. The immature scar is at FRST pink, hard, raised, and often itchy. As the collagen matures, the scar becomes almost acellular as the fibroblasts and blood vessels reduce. The external appearance of the scar becomes paler, while the scar becomes softer, fattens, and its itchiness diminishes. Most of these changes occur over the FRST 3 months, but a scar will continue to mature over 1 to 2 years, and sometimes more. Tensile strength will continue to increase but would not be expected to exceed around 80% that of normal skin. There is well-established evidence for managing scars with pressure, compression therapy, silicone sheets and gels, intralesional corticosteroid injection, and surgery. 14. Other treatment modalities include massage therapy, psychological counseling, laser therapy, radiotherapy, cryosurgery, and intralesional injection of other products. Prevention of adverse scar formation is better than treatment, so it is important to correctly manage wounds. Table 3.2. Optimal surgical management starts with careful planning, tissue handling and meticulous technique. For example, placing incisions along relaxed skin tension lesions where possible, and avoiding straight-line incisions across section creases. Early debridement reduces the risk of infection and allows for earlier wound closure. Dirt-ingrained, tattooed scars are usually preventable by proper initial scrubbing and cleansing of the wound, figure 3.16. It is important to recognize normal anatomical landmarks to avoid misaligned scars, such as at the lip vermilion border where even a 1 mm discrepancy is noticeable at a distance. Skin closure should be without tension and allow for postoperative edema typically associated with injury and healing. Wounds should be sutured in layers unless they are very small. Deep dermal absorbable sutures hold the skin edges together to allow subsequent subcuticular or skin sutures. Large and deep wounds also require closure of the fascial layer, for example scarpus fascia in the abdomen. Subcuticular suturing avoids skin suture marks. If skin sutures are used, suture marks may be minimized by using monofilament sutures that are removed in a timely fashion depending on anatomical location. For example, sutures are typically removed by 5 days in the face versus 10 to 14 days in the lower limb. Following wound closure, scar prevention measures include tension relief, taping, hydration and ultraviolet protection. 0.14 Silicone sheeting or gel is widely accepted as the FRST line prophylactic and treatment option for hypertrophic and keloid scars. The management of hypertrophic and keloid scars as difficult and international recommendations from 2014 are summarized in figures 3.17 and 3.18.15. Later scar treatment includes intralesional corticosteroid injections, typically using triamcinolone acetonide 10 to 40 mg per milliliter every 4 to 6 weeks until the scar has fattened. Revisional scar surgery may be appropriate. For example, for correcting alignment of scars. Contractures. Scar contractures can cause severe functional, psychological and aesthetic problems, figure 3.19. Contractures across joints may restrict the range of movement, leading to deformity, impairment and disability. Contractures may also result from the differential growth pattern between scar and surrounding tissues. Surgical contracture release and reconstruction can be an effective treatment option. A key principle is the replacement of scar tissue with healthy tissue. A wide range of reconstructions are described, summary box 3.4, and typically involve skin grafts or FAPs. More information can be found in part 6. Local FAPs such as Z-plasty, figure 3.20, and its variants can be used to lengthen and transpose the scar. Many other local FAPs have been described, including YV, VY and W-plasty. Free FAPs may be required for resurfacing severe contractures. In general, FAPs are preferable to skin grafts because of graft contracture. When skin grafts are used, full thickness is preferred to split thickness as they have a better texture and contract less during healing. Management algorithm for hypertrophic scars. Light gray indicates initial management strategies, dark gray indicates secondary management options. A preferred initial option, B2.5-20 mg per milliliter, face, 20 to 40 mg per milliliter, body. Alternative therapy options for severe lesions include bleomycin, mitomycin C, laser therapy and cryotherapy. Scar prevention and treatment should not begin before epithelium and wound stabilization. A combination and alternative therapies include massage, physical therapy, corticosteroids, tension relieving surgical intervention, excision, grafting or FAP coverage. hydrocolloid dressings, antihistamines in laser therapy. 5FU, 5-fluorouracil, PDL, pulsed dye laser. Redrawn with permission from Gold M.H., Maguire M., Mastota et al. Updated international clinical recommendations on scar. Immature hypertrophic, red, slide. Apply prevention algorithm, i.e. silicone gel or sheeting, hypoallergenic paper tape or onion extract cream. Persists for greater than 1 month, treat as a linear hypertrophic scar. PDLA or fractional laser therapy. Widespread burn hypertrophic, red, raised. Admission to a specialty burn and ITD. Silicone gel or sheeting, pressure garments and or onion extract cream. Fractional laser therapy. Combination or alternative therapies. Linear hypertrophic, red, raised, itchy. Silicone gel or sheeting, 2 months. Intralesional, corticosteroid injection B, repeat monthly. PDLA or fractional laser therapy. Pressure therapy. Severe scars. Surgical excision plus corticosteroids 5FU plus corticosteroids or alternative therapies. Surgical excision plus postoperative silicone gel or sheeting. Management algorithm for keloids. Light gray indicates initial management strategies, dark gray indicates secondary management options. Acryotherapy may be used in conjunction with intralesional corticosteroids, depending on physician experience and comfort with its application. Ablative fractional lasers are the preferred initial laser therapy option for patients with minor keloids. 5FU, 5-fluorouracil. Opening parenthesis. Minor keloid, red, raised. Silicone gel, sheeting plus intralesional corticosteroids. Fractional or pulsed dye laser therapy. Major, high-risk keloid, dark, raised. Intralesional corticosteroids. 5FU plus intralesional corticosteroids. Fractional or pulsed dye laser therapy. Patient counseling regarding recurrence rate and expectations. Surgical excision with adjuvant. Silicone gel or sheeting or intralesional corticosteroids or both, radiotherapy, alternative therapies, bleomycin, mitomycin C, imiquimod.